Hello there, my name is Daniel Bowater and I completed the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage exactly 1 year ago, and in this little video I'm going to describe how that changed my life and why I'd recommend trying that pilgrimage yourself and how it might benefit you. So the Camino de Santiago is a historical walk across northern Spain. There are several routes, but the Camino Francis Trail is the most commonly chosen one, and it's got a very deep rooted history in the Reconquista of Spain. Last year in May I left from St. John Pied de Port and began the 37 days of walking to Finisterre, which was about 920 kilometers, and in that time I saw so many amazing things, and I've made a little video of 20 minutes or so showing the highlights of that in my channel, so check it out if you get a chance. So as you might realise, I'm Australian, and in Australia the Camino pilgrimage is not really very well known. It's something that only a tiny minority of Christian people would do, whereas in Europe it's very well known, especially places like Ireland and Germany. There's many thousands of pilgrims complete the trail each year. I think something like 200,000 people do it some years, and I did it in 2017, last year. So I guess as a consequence of that, a lot of people I know have a very obviously they don't have the same level of understanding of the meaning behind doing a pilgrimage like that. It isn't just a casual stroll, it's a pretty serious commitment where you are walking over 20 kilometers most days, and you're walking across the Pyrenees and many treacherous areas, pretty much the whole width of Spain, and you're seeing and immersing yourself in a special culture, and you're walking in places that have huge historical significance. So trying to relay this to my friends and family back home was very difficult. They tended to believe their own notion of what it might be, and they really couldn't understand the motive for it. And hopefully by the time this segment's over, if you feel that way about it, you might learn a bit more about it yourself. So how I found out about the journey was through, believe it or not, our good old ABC channel in Australia. They had a sale on DVDs, and I like watching documentaries, and I bought one for like $5 or $10. I bought several, and the one I thought was going to be boring and not that good, it was called Unlikely Pilgrims, where they take an Irish guide takes 3 drug addicts from Sydney to Spain to walk this trail, and I found it so amazing, and after watching it I could not remove the thought from my mind of doing it myself, because these guys, inexperienced walkers, as the title suggests, they still gave it a pretty good attempt. And I know with my interest in seeing new things and meeting people and traveling, I knew that I would be able to give it a good attempt, and it lived up to everything I expected. I love Australia and my country, but I think we've got a lot of big problems with a superficial way of living, and I guess maybe some of the American lifestyle factors have caused that too, that have trickled over into our country. But I think that the way of life has become so homogenised and cheapened, and I think the way that the Spanish people have maintained a lot of their like with their food and their music and their wines and their attitudes, I think that while Spain is by no means perfect, that's one thing they have got right, and in Australia we have got woefully wrong, and everything has become so meaningless, superficial, materialistic. The pilgrimage is viewed as like a sabbatical or a time of reflection, and you are walking through some tough terrain in the first third of the Camino, a lot of incline walks, and then that becomes it gives way to a sparse open area in the middle of Spain called the Meseta, and that's more of a spiritual component or a mental component to the journey. And then the last bit in Galicia, it changes again to forests and spectacular mountainsides, and that's where it becomes more spiritual. That's where it becomes more of a spiritual journey. There's like 3 components to it, and I wasn't sure if I believed that type of philosophy to it, but it's really the truth. That's really exactly how I experienced it myself. So I come from far north Queensland, from Cairns. I've lived in Brisbane as well for a lot of my life, but the adult part of my life I've lived in the northeast part of Queensland, and it's very beautiful, lots of jungle and reefs and natural wonders, and it's a spectacular place. But the remarkable thing about it is how, I'd hate to say it, but how the personality of a lot of the local people there contrast with the beauty and the magnificence of the actual surroundings. And I found myself, after about a decade of farm work, seeing so much bad attitude and misery, and just a lack of appreciation for life, and I could not force myself to accept living in that paradigm forever. So that was what changed it for me. It got to about 2017 and the early 2017, and I thought, no, I'm 35, I'm going to see Europe. I don't care if I have to get a credit card or whatever, I'm doing it. And it was the best choice ever. I went to Paris and then went down to St. John from there, and went to Italy as well after that. Felt like I needed to totally revamp my life. I felt like other people were deciding my actions. I felt like my career choice was a poor career choice. I felt like I wasn't really in the right job, and I could contribute a lot more to society and live a much more meaningful life. And having that sense of purpose and meaning after I finished that pilgrimage gave me the inspiration to study again, to improve my qualifications, and then I was able to change careers. And now what you're seeing now, I'm in Thailand. I'm in South Pattaya, which is one of Thailand's biggest cities, and this is a beautiful place called Pratamnak, which is a massive hill escarpment with a big Buddha statue. It's amazing. I came to a lot of profound realizations about my own issues, particularly in that middle part of the trail where you were walking in sparse open vineyards and a lot of grazing country, and it gives you a lot of time to internalize your thoughts. It gives you a lot of time to interact with people, to think about important things about survival with water and how far you can walk and that type of thing. So I found that I kept on focusing on 2 or 3 issues in my life where people had done the wrong thing by me, and I found that the continual focus on bitterness was sort of like consuming me, but I also at the same time was appreciating the surroundings and the environment and all these wonderful things around me more and more as I progressed. And I wouldn't have imagined I would feel that way. I would have imagined that as you go further you would be more exhausted and you would feel more depleted. But the opposite effect occurred for me. As I continued, I felt more and more cleansed spiritually and physically. And in the last probably 10 days of the walk, and especially the last 6 days, I felt absolutely amazing. Like my whole, almost like I'd been totally reborn in a way. And that middle part of the journey, sort of between Burgos and Leon, that part of it was really important for me to sort of reconcile all this conflict within myself and really try and just live in a present state of mind. And I think when we are in the same surroundings all the time, for example, a good example is back home in North Queensland, you see things and it's the same combination of things all the time. And over a long time frame, that really has a poor or a degrading effect on your ability to live in a present state. Because when you can't be grateful to see something new, you take things for granted, you don't appreciate the present time. And the only genuine reality that we live in is the present state. A past state is different. It's something that can't be changed. It's something that is an imagined thing that you've seen a perspective of. The future is something that's a prediction, and I found that I came to this realization that so much of my life I was focusing on the past in a depressed way, or the future in a sort of like in a state of anxiety. And when you can just let go of those two things, those two fake imagined states, and live in a real, authentic present state, I think your quality of life improves dramatically. So that was one of the biggest realizations I had, and part of the healing process with that was to take a more balanced outlook on what things were causing me pain internally. My relationships, my interactions with friends and work colleagues that cause me a lot of grief. And I found I became really angry and resentful at certain times, but then at other times I came to these like epiphany, or a solution almost, where I could think, well, maybe in some instances people have done the wrong thing by me, but a percentage of that is also my fault. A percentage of it, even if it's a lower percentage, is to do with me. And I think that hanging on to that hatred really does no favours for you. It robs you of your authentic way of living. And I think that in a lot of ways people focus on hating because they don't receive recognition or anything good themselves. One of those realizations that I came upon in the Masada was that I wasn't living in that humble state of mind, even though I believed I was. I wasn't truly living in a way that was showing gratitude from humility. And those of you who've read the Bible or parts of the Bible will have read Luke, I think it's 14, 18 or something like that, where there's a quote in there where he says, or the Lord says that he who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who is humbled will be exalted. And I found that a powerful thing. I read after the Camino pilgrimage, and it explains a lot of it helps to understand the way of thinking that is a healthy and meaningful way of thinking. On a few rare occasions, particularly after the pilgrimage, when I prayed at night time before I sleep, I just found it was so beneficial to not only pray for the things for my family and people around me, and for peace and for prosperity and that type of thing, but also actually pray for the people who did the wrong thing by me, and actually, as hard as it is to do, include your enemies in your prayers. Because when you do that, you have really crossed, you've really progressed into a state of mind that is much healthier. You've almost you've taken, not only have you taken responsibility for your own involvement, but you've also freed that terrible, degrading, self-destructive mentality that can ruin your life. And hatred is such a poisonous thing. And the Camino helped me realize that I was living in a really bad frame of mind, and seeing all the wonderful things in places like Pamplona, and places like Melide, places like Finisterre and Murcia. They're incredible. They're new things. Some of the animals and plants, I'd seen these arches in the forest where all the ferns joined together and they were like fluoro green, and I was walking through like a tunnel of ferns that were also a massive forest. I walked through the Pyrenees between St. John and Ronsas valleys, and I saw cathedrals and history that I had never seen anything like in my life in Australia, I can tell you that. Like Leon Cathedral with the painted glass windows, and seeing the light filter through the colours in the glass, and being in there, that was absolutely amazing. So in a lot of ways it's a unique journey, or doing the trek and going through the mental hardships of it, and going through the mental cycle of sort of suffering a bit, and then overcoming the suffering and feeling joy. You can see how much better it is as you go from town to town. If you live in that humble and grateful state of mind, that you can really live a much more meaningful and healthy and present and more rewarding type of a life. And that quote in the Bible is beautiful, I think. And obviously this is a Christian pilgrimage, and part of the belief is, especially for the Catholic people, is that St. James, it remains, are in Santiago de Compostela, and it was special for me to see the tomb there and partake in the traditions of the Catholic people. I walked with a lot of Irish people, and I met so many great pilgrims from over Europe who taught me so much about my life. I met a guy who was from Germany, and he actually walked directly from Germany to Santiago. It took several months, and he taught me a lot about the living a higher purpose. We had a conversation one night at the albergue where he described how he characterized a true pilgrim, and that conversation, not unbeknownst to me at the time, ended up having an enormous impact on me personally. I thought to begin with he was just maybe a bit crazy, but the meaning behind what he said was it stuck with me for a long time. He talked about how there are 5 components to a pilgrim that reflect the traits of an eagle, and I printed out those 5 traits with a picture of an eagle, and I always look at them when I get ready for work, because it makes so much sense to follow those principles and to have a meaningful life.